He overheard me laughing about his size, and the revenge that followed was beyond cruel. Hello, Reddit. My name is Anna, and I'm a 28-year-old doctor. I've been married for 2 years now, and although we have no kids, we're still trying for them. But I'm not sure any kids are going to come along now unless David forgives me. I kind of screwed up, and now David wants nothing to do with me, but is demanding everything I am. I mean it literally. Everything that I am and own literally is because of David. And if I lose him, I lose everything. And there's the fact that I'm still in love with him. Despite the fact that I messed up big time, I love David, and I really don't think I can live without him. Let me explain what happened right from the beginning. I grew up in a family of 5, including my parents, although we were very happy, and my parents were so in love, and it was so obvious that they had all of us out of love. Until now, I have never witnessed my parents having any arguments. They were always so quiet about their problems and tried as much as possible not to show them to us. But as the eldest and only girl, I of course knew when there were issues. I'm about 5 years older than John and 8 years older than Sam, so I was much wiser and knew when everything wasn't fine. And things weren't exactly fine for a long period. The problem was that my parents were poor. Very much, in fact. We were barely feeding fine, and then there were other bills to pay in the house and all, and it frustrated me so much. Most times, my mother would go hungry, so my brothers and I could eat, and I detested those moments. It made me feel like I was exploiting her, and I didn't like it one bit. I pretended most times in school to belong to the rich kids gang because I wanted to believe in some fantasy where I was the rich girl with rich parents, and eating didn't have to be such a difficult thing for us. The dresses I wanted growing up, and believe me, I did grow up fast. I mean body-wise. By the time I was 14, I had the body of a 25-year-old, and I really did take advantage of that fact. When I was 16, I met David. Actually, my parents met David. My brother Sam had been very sick, and he had been taken to the hospital, and he was discovered to have appendicitis. He needed an operation to get rid of it. My parents had no money, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get the money. But fortunately, David, who had been a resident at the time, had decided to carry out the surgery and pay for it, seeing how desperate we were for Sam to get well, but had no money. My parents had been so grateful to him. At the time, we did not even know that his father owned the hospital because I had even witnessed him paying for the surgery. I adored him, and it was then I decided to become a medical doctor just like him. He employed my parents and gave a ridiculous amount of money as a salary for the job they were doing, which wasn't up to half of what they did in their previous jobs. Soon enough, my mom was able to save enough money to rent a shop and sell a few things. My dad continued working for him, well, until I married him. I liked David a lot during that time. I mean, I had a huge crush on him, and I even confessed to David how I felt. He had told me jokingly that when I grew up and still hadn't found someone I was in love with, then I could come back. I held on to that promise and pursued my medical dreams. When David found out my dream was to become a surgeon, he supported me. I mean, literally, he funded everything concerning my school, and he even gave me an allowance too. When I had friends in medical school, I would tell them that I was being sponsored by an uncle. I never did tell them who David was to me. Although David was always checking on me, he made sure that I lacked nothing, both counseling and whenever I needed some help from his medical experiences. I was in year 3 of medical school when I met Isaiah. Isaiah was also a medical student. He was quite rich, and it showed from the way everyone flocked around him and respected him, even the professors. I heard some rumors that his father was one of the sponsors of the university, so I guess the respect came from that. Isaiah, despite being quite wealthy, was quite humble, and girls loved him for it. Well, including me. I had a huge crush on Isaiah, and I wanted everything to do with him, but that was almost impossible with the number of people he had around him. But Isaiah noticed me one time, and it was one of my happiest moments. He had come to me because he needed some assistance with some courses, and I, of course, had gladly offered the help he needed. We started hanging out and soon became good friends. It was after a year of friendship that Isaiah and I started dating. Isaiah and I were regarded as a couple in class because of how often we hung out together. We read together, ate together, and mostly slept at each other's place. I liked Isaiah so much, and I felt he liked me too. Well, that was until another year later when I discovered that Isaiah actually liked men and not women. He was using me as a cover-up when rumors started to spread because he hadn't been dating anybody at that point. I found out in the most horrible way possible. I saw Isaiah and his best friend, who was obviously a guy, making out heavily. I mean, without clothes on, in fact. I should have noticed before, actually, but because I was blinded by the love I had for him, I ignored all the signs. One of the most important ones was not being able to turn Isaiah on, no matter how hard I tried. Isaiah and I only ever had sex once throughout our relationship, and it was a 5-minute thing. Isaiah never got turned on, and at first I thought maybe he had erectile dysfunction, but he always had erections in the mornings, and even when we watched movies and sex scenes came on. That day, I had gone to get some groceries, and I met Cole outside when I was leaving. He had come to see Isaiah, like he usually did, so I wasn't even bothered by it. Most times, when he came around, they would lock themselves indoors for hours, and I thought it was because of the games they were either watching or playing because of the loud TV almost all the time. I forgot to ask Isaiah what he wanted me to get him, and when I called him, he wasn't picking up. Since I wasn't yet far from the house, I decided to go back. It was then I found them in that uncompromising state. I broke up with Isaiah, and it almost ruined me. I almost failed a semester, and it was David who helped me get back into my academics through little help here and there. When I finished school and started my internship at David's hospital, he had already become the owner of the hospital because his dad had passed on. Because I was known to be involved with David, I was treated specially. Not exactly specially, but I was not overloaded with work as the others were. But then rumors started flying around that I was sleeping around with David, even though we had not even had anything going on between us. It was then I started to want David again. I started trying to get close to David, more closely, and not as friends this time. David, of course, tried to avoid me at all costs, but I was adamant, and then I knew he really liked me, because who stayed a bachelor for so many years despite having ladies flock around him? I knew he was trying to avoid me because he was much older than me and because of my parents. My dad still worked as his gardener, and he respected my dad so much and didn't want to ruin their relationship. But I continued pestering David until he eventually caved in and finally asked me to be his girlfriend. At first, we were being discreet about it because David wanted to find a way to let my parents know, but I didn't exactly care what my parents thought, so I was the carefree one. Even in the hospital, I would go to his office when he was less busy and sit there for long hours with him, and since he is the boss, nobody dared to question why I wasn't working. I took advantage of the fact that I was with David a whole lot of times and got out of duties, so I only worked when I deemed it fit, and by the end of the year, I became a resident in the hospital, even though that was not the case for the other interns. One dreadful incident happened in the hospital, and David had helped me cover it up. It had been after that time we had gotten married. We had a small ceremony with just my reluctant father, elated mother, and his family also, who had been the witnesses. I didn't care that it was a small affair. All I cared for was that I was his wife, and it meant I got access to a lot of things, including my own promotion as a director in the hospital. My father had not been reluctant because he didn't want David to marry me, but it had been the opposite. He thought I was not good enough for David, and he had not minced his words when he said it too. But despite his not-so-cool words, I still got married to David, and he had been there to witness it. Well, about the incident that happened at the hospital. I might be getting my medical license revoked, so I guess I have nothing more to lose now. I went behind the rules and regulations of the hospital and had done a complex surgery based on textbook knowledge, and it had given negative feedback. I thought it was an easy surgery, but seeing that all the other doctors, more experienced than I was, were refusing to do it, I had decided that I'd read enough to be able to deal with any problems in the OR. But then, things had not happened as I planned. During the surgery, I had mistakenly created another whole new problem, and the patient had gone into a coma immediately. David had helped me cover up the case and had ruled it out as the normal result that was supposed to be, instead of the medical mishap it had been. So after my wedding with David, I started slacking more and more in the hospital, especially after being a director. I started to care more about my looks, and since I now had the money to look good, I wanted to explore it in every way possible. I started the journey of skincare and cosmetics, and I was visiting every beauty shop that was either recommended online or by someone and was very expensive. I wanted to look young, and thanks to David's money and my position as the director in the hospital, I could. It was there I met my new friends Ella and Stacy. They too were also particular about their skins, and since we shared the same objectives, we started meeting very often to share beauty tips. Stacy is married with 2 kids, but most of the time, the kids are stuck with their nanny so she could have time to herself, and her husband was always traveling around the world for business sake. She was free almost all the time. Ella, on the other hand, was very single, and she loved sleeping around with older men, especially the ones that were married, to fund her extravagant lifestyle. We hung out almost all the time, and we were always spending. David, although, was not too pleased with my newfound friendship with the girls, and we had some arguments about it. He didn't encourage the fact that I went to work anytime I pleased and left anytime I wanted, and also spent time obsessing about my skin. But I didn't care then. I wanted to be free and spend money as I liked. David and I started trying out for a child. Although it was mostly David doing the trying, I just wanted him to get off my back because of my newfound hobby, so I just went with the flow. I did everything I was supposed to do for the first year of marriage, but I couldn't get pregnant. I even went with David to a fertility clinic, and we were considered fertile enough to have kids, but I still couldn't get pregnant. I eventually stopped trying, and even though David tried to convince me to try IVF or adoption, I wasn't so cool with the ideas, so I refused. When David kept talking about it, I lied to him that I was sterile. I made up some stories about an accident I had in medical school, and I had been declared sterile and couldn't have kids. I told him that I paid someone in the fertility clinic to give that test result, and when David, after recovering from his shock, had asked that we visit a gynecologist, I refused to go. Despite the fact that we had capable doctors right there in our hospital, I still refused to do any test because I had lied, obviously. I was very much fertile, but I just wasn't getting pregnant. Okay. To be truthful, I am fertile, but I was using pills to avoid pregnancy. I didn't want to be saddled with a baby that young in life. I thought I was just discovering what fun meant, and I didn't want to be burdened by morning sicknesses or tiredness to visit the spa and all. And there are the changes to my body that having a baby would do, and I wasn't ready for all that. But I clearly couldn't tell David that because he wanted a child desperately, so I kept it to myself and kept refusing every attempt of his to make things work. I kept hanging out with Ella and Stacy, and we girls were having the fun of our lives. Well, so I thought, until now. It had been 2 months into my friendship with Stacy and Ella that I discovered that Stacy was cheating on her husband with one of his workers. They apparently were meeting in secret, and her husband had no knowledge of it, and the fact that she was proud of it. She even would tell us about her sexual escapades with him and how much she enjoyed sex with him. I became really curious. I never really had any sexual ordeals with others before marrying David. My first sex had been with Isaiah, and that time it had not even been very nice. The second person I ever slept with was David, and so hearing her talk about her adventurous sex, I was really curious. But then again, there was no one to do it with, so I just was curious. But it was then I met Ethan. Ethan had been one of the new interns, and he is very smart. Ethan asked all the right questions, and he was quick to give answers, and the way he worked showed that he was not only textbook smart, but was good at dealing with the physical aspect of it. He caught my interest when I had been visiting the hospital that day to drop off some things for David, when the interns had been asked a question by one of the residents, and he had answered very smartly, in fact. I remembered being asked that question when I was an intern, and I had stammered through the answer because it had been a trick question. But Ethan clearly didn't have that problem because he had answered very quickly and did not even stammer. I was greatly impressed, and I had asked about him. The answers were easy because I was, of course, one of the bosses, and I could get access to their files. I started visiting the hospital more frequently just to see Ethan at work. All of those times, I did not speak to him. I just observed him from afar. David was quite happy that I was finally coming back into the hospital, and he had not noticed it was for an entirely different reason. When I told my friends about my newfound interest in Ethan, they had encouraged me to pursue him if I wanted to. I shied away from the idea at first, though, because I was obviously married, and David loved me very much, and I did love him too. I didn't want to cheat on him. I was already lying to him about the sterile thing. I didn't want to add to the list of the things I was doing, so I decided to stop trying to find out anything about Ethan. But then again, I just couldn't stop. I was intrigued by his brilliance, and it amused me how he would occasionally almost absent-mindedly tap his pen against his teeth when he was wondering about something, or how his face lit up whenever he solved some sort of puzzle in his head. I was starting to think I needed help, especially because I was his boss, literally, and yet I found time to notice these little things about him. And again, I was very much married. Well, I guess I was not the only one who noticed the other person. Ethan started to come to my office. At first, it had been with excuses of having questions that needed answers from me because I was around and the others weren't. Then later, it was some questions about the rules and regulations of the hospital and all. Eventually, I discovered he was just making up excuses to talk to me. I asked him directly what he wanted from me, knowing I was married, and Ethan had told me his feelings weren't exactly bothered by the fact that I was married or that I am his boss. I honestly had not wanted things to go further, but it had, far and farther beyond anything I could have done. Ethan and I started sleeping together.
No.
We obviously couldn't do it in the hospital, so yes, we found ways of meeting outside the hospital. The first time it happened had been when he had invited me out for lunch on his day off from work. I went with the idea in my head that I was going to list all the very obvious reasons why we couldn't be together. But as you must have guessed, it hadn't ended the way I planned. Or let's just say it ended up the way my heart had pictured it, but not the way my brain had pictured it would. So Ethan had decided that the best place to meet up for lunch was his apartment so we could talk comfortably, and I had agreed to it. He cooked and set up the table while I watched him, and we talked about random stuff. We ate, and after we were done with our food, he had opened up a bottle of wine, and we drank and just still talked. He told me about his past, including his parents, and then his ex-girlfriend, who had ended things with him because he was too busy with work to have her time. Then she had decided to move on with his own brother. Apparently they were married now, and he couldn't bear the emotional grunt of it all, which was why he had moved to our town. I felt pity for him, and I sympathized with him. Well, that sympathy had turned into another thing entirely because Ethan and I had ended up in his one bedroom on his bed, and without any clothes. After the whole thing, I regretted it so much, and I just left without a word to Ethan, even though he tried getting me to say something. I felt really guilty that day, and I wanted so badly to confess my sins to David, but I just couldn't. I was scared he would never forgive me, and I couldn't lose him, so I just kept everything to myself, promising myself that it would never happen again. All I had to do was just beg Ethan to keep quiet about everything that had happened between us. But that was certainly not the case because the whole thing repeated itself over and over again. In fact, Ethan had been so daring one time, and we had sex right over my desk in my office. I had to place my hand over my mouth to avoid moaning out loud in case anyone could hear us. I stopped having sex with David, although not completely. I loved David, and I still do, but at that point, I just wasn't enjoying sex with him as much as I was with Ethan. Ethan had a huge male genital organ in comparison to David's, and he pleased me a great deal more than David did. David was quite religious, even though he barely went to church. He didn't believe in getting down and dirty with his tongue, and he never tried it with me before. But Ethan was no saint. I mean at all. He did all sorts of things, and he taught me different things, even to some very, very naughty things that I'd rather not talk about here, but you know what I mean. But I guess David noticed the gap in our relationship, and he tried his best to bring our sex life back to what it was before. He would buy me flowers, take me out on a romantic evening, and buy me dinner. He would even set up the mood for sex, but I still wasn't just feeling it. At that point, I managed to convince myself that I loved David, and I was going to continue to be married to him, but I was going to continue being sexually satisfied by Ethan. It was a win-win situation for me, and I managed to convince myself, despite my guilt, that it was all that mattered. I guess my mother noticed something about my behavior. Or perhaps not my behavior, but my visitor. David had traveled for a medical conference out of town, and he was to be gone for 3 days. Ethan lied at work that he had a sick mother he had to take care of, so he took permission off work for 3 days, which I had granted. We spent time together right in my home. We corrupted nearly everywhere you could think of with sex for that whole 3 days. It had been on the 3rd day that my mother had decided to pay me a surprise visit. I had not been expecting any guest, and I thought it was only the delivery man bringing our food that we ordered. I was barely covered because I had only one of my husband's shirts on me, which I had grabbed when I heard the doorbell, and my state probably showed my mother exactly what I had been doing. Ethan must have heard us, and he had quickly dressed up and just greeted us and left, instead of waiting around until evening. My mother had looked at me, and being quite a very smart woman, had asked me very patiently what I was doing with another man in my husband's home. I tried to deny it, but my mom wanted to hear nothing of it and just warned me severely not to ruin my marriage, and she had then left. I was confused at that point. I liked having sex with no strings attached with Ethan, and I loved my husband David. I didn't want to lose both, but my mother's warning just kept ringing in my ears, so I asked my friends for advice. Before that, they knew nothing about my affair with Ethan, so when I did tell them, they were elated and even asked me how it had been. Their reaction to my revelation actually made me feel better and that everything was all right again with the world. I threw away my mother's words and didn't mind it. In fact, I started avoiding seeing her so she wouldn't ask me any questions about it. Well, I guess what they say about karma is very true. What goes around must surely come right around and bite you very hard on the butt. My friend Stacy and her husband were celebrating their 10 years anniversary in grand style, and she had, of course, invited Ella and me, and had even asked us to come with our +1. She had even teased me about coming along with Ethan, and we had laughed about it. I invited David to come with me, and he had been happy to. I told Ethan about the party while we were lying down exhausted after a sex marathon one time, and I had not expected him to be there, but he had shown up at the party shockingly. So way before the party started, I mean about 2 days prior to that day, I told Ethan that we couldn't continue seeing each other as often as we did because David was starting to suspect me. Well, it had not been a lie. David was starting to suspect me, and it had been because of my mother. She had made a statement when David and I had gone to visit her and my father. He forced me there, by the way. And when we were talking, she had made some statement about cheating while looking directly at me. I grew uncomfortable, and I had to fake a cough to get out of the situation, and I thought it was over when we left my parents' place, but David, however, didn't think so. He had asked me why my mother had been behaving that way, and I had to lie and come up with some excuses about a cousin of mine who left her husband for her lover. My mistake was, I have no cousin, and David knew that, but he kept quiet and didn't say anything. Not that I didn't have any cousins, but I knew none because my parents actually eloped to be together, and so they were estranged from their family. I only just discovered now as I write how messed up that had been. So on the day of the party, I had glammed up, ready to dazzle and sparkle, but David had been surprisingly quiet. He didn't even compliment my looks, and when we got to the party, he had just mingled with the men who left their wives to their antics. My friends and I, although, didn't mind that, and we just laughed and sipped and gossiped about what the other women were wearing. It had been when Ethan had showed up that I had become tense. When my friends noticed how tense I was, they had asked, and I told them who showed up. Ella had whistled and had said that it was no wonder I was sleeping with him. We all laughed, and I somehow forgot that I was supposed to be very careful, especially because my lover and husband were in the same party. But I had gotten tipsy and was busy telling my friends about my sexual escapades with Ethan, who was staring right at me from across the room, but didn't approach me. I even joked about David's male genital organ being tiny, and it was therefore encouraging me to find pleasure elsewhere. Immediately I said it. Instead of my friends laughing and snickering like they had been doing all night, they just kept quiet, and I realized why only too late. David was right behind me, and I was so shocked. Before I could say anything to him, he just turned around and left the party. It took a whole lot of time before I could enter into the house. I just stood there outside the house for hours contemplating what to do or say. I mean, what exactly do you tell your husband who overheard you recounting your sexual stories to your friends, and even to the point of joking about his sexual prowess? Eventually, I gathered the courage to go in, and I met David waiting for me in our bedroom. He did not say a word to me even when I tried begging. He only just stared at me and didn't say anything. Eventually, he left me in the room and left the house and did not come back that weekend. I was so worried and scared of his silent reaction. David had never gotten angry with me before all through the times I've known him for, so I didn't even know what to expect. Well, what I didn't expect happened, and I mean that it was the most horrid thing to have happened to me. I went to work on the Monday, knowing that David would be at work, so I could perhaps get the chance to apologize. But immediately I entered the hospital, I was summoned by the board, and I was confronted by the issue I thought had died down. Apparently David exposed me, and he also fired Ethan very publicly. He made no effort to conceal the reason why he was firing Ethan, so everyone in the hospital knew it was because he had an affair with me. Now even the family of the patient I had stubbornly operated on, and who is still stuck in a coma, is suing me to court. I got the court order a few days ago. I'm absolutely doomed, guys. The painful part of it all is losing David. No, I don't want to believe I've totally lost him. So please, guys, help me. What do I do? How do I save my marriage and get David to forgive me? Update. Hello, Reddit. It's so devastating how I've fallen from the very high tops to the lowest bottom. My life is a painfully empty shadow of what it was before. I am divorced and scorned. By everybody, by you guys, who seem to think I'm a very horrible person, although you have used very colorful adjectives to describe me. I chose the less hurtful one. By my parents, who now, for all they care, I'm dead to, and most especially by David, who wants absolutely nothing to do with me. I've lost everything. And by everything, I mean literally everything. I've lost my medical license and all my money, which I used to settle the family, and even now I'm in debts because I have to be the one paying the medical bills of the patient who is stuck in a coma because of me, and only God knows how long that will be. I've lost my family, and I've lost David because of my selfish and stupid actions. Even the so-called friends I thought I had, they were all so fake. Stacy has apparently been discovered by her husband with her lover, and now she's going through a terrible divorce and is losing her 2 kids. Ella just left town because she was found out by one of the many men's wives she was sleeping with, and she has been haunted severally both at home and everywhere she went. So I'm all alone in this mess I've created for myself. I'm so ashamed of myself. I cannot believe I thought I would get away with everything I did to David. After everything he did for me, everything I became had been because of him. All because of him. And yet I still was so selfish and stupid enough not to have understood that fact. And I chose to repay him by sleeping around with someone else while married to him. No. Funny how it was only after everything had blown up in my face that I realized Ethan had been deceiving me. Apparently he's married with 3 kids, and he only ran away because his wife wanted to take every bit of his money after discovering him with several other girls despite being married. I allowed myself to be convinced. No, I led myself into believing that cheating with that conniving cheat was the best way to repay David. How stupid can I get? I regret so badly everything I did. I've hurt David so much, and this karma is clearly not playing around with me. I cannot even express with words how much I hate myself for the stupid decisions I've made, and how badly it's affecting me now. Here I am, divorced, medical license revoked, in serious debts, and so lonely. Life couldn't get any worse than this now, could it? Update. Hello, Reddit. It's me again. This is my last post here, and I know as much as every one of you here does too, that you guys probably don't want to hear from me again, which is why I'm going to make this post as short as possible. Remember my last post which I posted and ended with a rhetorical question? Well, I have an answer to that question now. My answer is yes. Life could get much worse than it was before because I'm right in the middle of my life getting much worse right now. I work as a waitress in a very small pub because I cannot apparently work as a medical doctor anywhere in the world, considering the fact that my license has been revoked, and I have so much debt to pay at the hospital treating the comatose patient, seeing that he needed regular attending to which required more money. It is bleeding me dry, and most of the time I barely have enough left to feed myself. and I did all of these to myself. I cannot even blame the devil, because I myself saw the trap and put both of my legs in it. I feel so horrible. I imagined if I had not done the horrible things to David, life would be so much better for us. I probably would have been pregnant or have even given birth to our baby, and knowing David, he would be the best dad in the world, and I would be the most pampered mother in the world. But I just went and ruined everything with my own hands, and I know that David will never forgive me. Hell, I know I don't even deserve an iota of forgiveness from him because I did the most dreadful thing to him. I wish I had been good to David. I wish I had not been so stupid and selfish and thrown away the wonderful gift God gave me. I had everything, and instead of being grateful for it, I had thrown it all away, and now it's too late to even try at all to bring it all back. I never should have. I really never should have done any of the things I did. All I'm stuck with now is regrets and the what-ifs. Well, I sure hope you guys are not ending up as I have, because I could tell you for free that it sure as hell isn't fun where I am. Thanks and goodbye.
Need advice? Our divorce lawyer is someone I have a past with. Now I'm in big trouble. Hey guys, it's my first time here on Reddit, and I'm here because I want to share a story with everyone. I also need help, so if you would please read this, I thank you, and I'll want your advice at the end of it. My name is Valerie, and I am 29 years old. I had an affair with my divorce lawyer. I know it's crazy to believe, but every time I think about it, I tell myself it's real. I am soon to be divorced, and my husband and I had planned to fix our relationship. Now, I know we can no longer fix it anymore. My husband's name is Greg, and he's 32 years old. I met Greg when I was in high school, and I was 17 years old then. I don't know why, but we hit it off immediately once we met. Greg was a caring guy, and I didn't see any flaws in him because he felt perfect to me. We dated throughout high school, but his family weren't doing okay financially. He tried getting jobs, but that didn't help much either. I told him I can help since I came from an above-average family and we were okay financially. He told me he didn't want help from his girlfriend, but he was really grateful. By the time we finished high school, I remember Greg was no longer cheerful since he was worrying about what to do next and how to help his family. I kept asking him why he didn't want my help, and he told me he wasn't comfortable. He said he was the one that's supposed to take care of me, not the other way round. I tried telling him I didn't care about the money issue, but I guess it was just a man thing. At one point, I couldn't meet up with him again, and we didn't see each other most of the time. I hated the fact that his pride was trying to come in between our relationship. I talked to him about it again, and he told me an uncle of his who was overseas called him to come work for me. I wanted to beg him to stay, but I knew that would be extremely selfish of me. He gave me one last kiss and told me to wait for him. He also said he'd understand if I wanted to find someone else, and he didn't want to tie me down. I told him I was going to wait for him no matter what it took. Greg also said he would be keeping in contact with me. 3 years passed, and I was 20 years old by then. Greg had been keeping in contact with me as promised. Throughout the years that we were far apart, he kept informing me about how things were going for him. He told me about the work. I can't disclose it here, sorry. But it was bringing a lot of money for his family. I was happy to hear, even though I wasn't happy about the job. I told Greg I missed him, and he said he missed me too. I asked Greg about when he planned on coming back, and he told me very soon. I loved Greg with all my heart, but my feelings kept fluctuating because he was far away. There was a time I dated a guy during the 3 years that had passed to fill that numb feeling I had, and I had slept with the guy then. I felt guilty, and it felt like I was cheating on Greg. I didn't tell Greg about it because I tried to keep the memory at the back of my mind. I didn't know that the memory would come back to haunt me. Another year passed, and I turned 21. By then, I had already moved out of my parents' house and rented my own place with the help of my parents. I didn't want to depend on my parents forever, so I decided to find a job. I didn't go to college because I didn't see the use. I was able to get a job as a teacher in a school through the connection of my parents. I think the other teachers in the school didn't like me because of that, but it wasn't like I cared. The pay was okay, and I told Greg all about my own place and everything that had happened. Greg asked me where I stayed in the US, and I told him. I thought he was just asking for no reason, but one day, I heard the doorbell ring. I opened the door, and it was Greg standing on my front doorstep. I was shocked to see him there, and my emotions were all tangled up. I didn't know what to feel, and all I knew was that my love for him had reduced. I thought it was maybe because it had been 4 years since I'd met him, and the love would rekindle for him. I had to pretend like I still loved him, and I jumped on him, hugging him tight. We caught up on a lot of things, and he told me more things. He told me that he was going to open his business firm. I won't be disclosing the name. He bought an apartment for the two of us to live in. He also said that he would open a boutique for me, and I was happy about that. Along the way, everything followed as planned, and it was okay for us. Yet, I didn't feel that full love for him. By the time I turned 23, we went on one of our dates that day to celebrate my birthday. I was shocked when he got down on one knee and proposed. I was going to say no because I wasn't sure or ready, but he looked so happy, and I didn't want to break his heart by telling him no. I know what everyone's thinking, and I know what I did was wrong, but I can't go back to the past to change that. We got married by the time I was 24, and he made it a big wedding. He invited all our family members and friends. I didn't want a big party, but he was so excited throughout as we were planning it. We got married and everything worked out well. I gave birth to a baby boy and we named him after his grandfather, Jonah. Our family came around and we celebrated. My boutique business was booming and I had a lot of customers. I think things started to change when he stopped coming home early. He told me his job was getting stressful and taking most of his time. I complained to him about it, but Greg kept saying I should give him more time and he'd make it up to me. My love for him kept fading and I could see the distance set in. Jonah was growing old and he turned 2 years and I was 27 years then. The only time Jonah could see Greg was on weekends and I hated that. I tried complaining, but he asked for more time. Eventually he became free, but that didn't make my feelings for him better. He usually told me, "I love you," but it has been long since I heard those words from him. I knew he was also feeling that distance and losing his feelings for me. Jonah is 4 years old now and he's very smart. It pained me to see him walking around not knowing he had parents who didn't love each other that much. I stopped going to my boutique at one point because I got some workers to help me out there. I talked to Greg and told him we had to get a divorce because I couldn't force myself to love him. I asked him if he was feeling the same way and he said he was. He wanted us to fix it and he tried, but it was to no avail and the feelings didn't rekindle. Yet he kept on trying. One day he told me we were going to get a divorce, and I won't lie, but I felt a little bit happy. I was away from the loveless marriage, which was my fault in the same place. Greg told me that he was going to get a divorce lawyer, and he was true with his words. But I regret thinking this. The next day came, and it was 10 a.m. in the morning when the doorbell rang and I went to answer it. The shock on my face was wide because I was surprised to see the person in front. It was the man I had something with during the past. He was the one I didn't tell Greg about. I told him to come in, and I tried to compose myself to act like I didn't know him. What bothered me was the way my heart started beating fast, but not from fear, but excitement. I didn't know what to feel, but it was the same as the first time I met Greg. The divorce lawyer introduced himself as Lucas, and my husband shook his hand. I knew his name, but I acted like I didn't know him. I couldn't have the strength to tell my husband about it, and I hope Lucas said nothing about it. He sat down and he said nothing for a few seconds. My husband stood up to receive a call before anything started, and Lucas and I stared at ourselves. I didn't know what to say to him, and I'm pretty sure he didn't know either. I was about to say something to him, but my husband came back. The meeting started, and I watched as Lucas and Greg discussed a lot of things. Greg told him about the whole relationship issue we had, and that we wanted a divorce because we were falling out of love, and I felt guilty. We decided on the things I would be getting after the divorce would be finalized, and how we would fix child custody on Jonah. Lucas said he understood, and he needed 2 days to put together documents and review them before he was back. Throughout the conversation, I felt his eyes stealing glances at me. Lucas gave Greg his number, and he gave me too. The whole thing was weird because I didn't have his number anymore since I deleted it long ago. We thanked him and he left. After that happened, I received a weird text that night with just a "hey," and I already knew who it was. I texted him back, and that was how I started talking to him. That night, he said he had a lot of questions to ask me and he would love to meet up with me the next day. I was hesitant at first, but I couldn't turn him down since I was the one that cut contact with him with no explanations, and he saw me a year later, married to someone. I agreed to meet him, and I was still contemplating whether I should tell my husband the truth, but I wasn't ready. Before I went to sleep, my husband told me again that he really wanted to make us work, and and he was sorry for everything he did and how he had been acting. I also apologized to him, but just at random, not for a particular thing. I couldn't tell him that I was the one that began to fall out of love in the first place ever since he traveled then. The next day arrived faster than I had expected, and I already hated the day. Greg pecked me on my cheeks before leaving, and I smiled at him. I had to drop Jonah off at the school before I went to the bathroom to clean up and get ready to meet with Lucas. The problem was that I knew I wanted to dress up for him, and I felt silly about that. I put on my casual clothes and a light makeup. I felt crazy because why was I putting on makeup to meet up with an ex? Anyways, I had contacted him, and he told me to meet up with him at a restaurant. I went there, and once I spotted him, he waved at him. I wore my glasses because I hoped none of my husband's friends would recognize me. We were both speechless after I sat down, and I wished he would say something first to break the silence. My wish came through, and he started by asking him why I broke it off then and everything we had. I told him the truth about Greg and the whole story about us, and he listened. By the time I was done, he sighed and he said he understood everything. He said he was upset with me and he felt happy to see me, and I smiled at him. The next thing he said after was shocking. He told me he still wanted something with me, but I just frowned. He did know I was married, but even though I was going through a divorce, I couldn't believe he was going to say something like that. Although a part of me actually wanted to be with him and let him feel me, and I was ashamed of that thought. I knew I was supposed to feel annoyed by what he said, but the thing that annoyed me was that I didn't. I didn't say anything, and I got lost in thoughts, not until he called my name to snap me out of it. He apologized for saying something so absurd, but I brushed it off and told him it was okay. Lucas asked me if my husband knew about us and what we had in the past, but I told him I couldn't tell him, so he just nodded in an understanding manner. He asked me if we could be just friends because he missed what we had and the way we vibed with each other. I didn't think he had any second thoughts about it, but I should have known better. I didn't even think before I said yes to us being friends again. I went home that day with a smile on my face, not knowing that things were going to take a turn for the worse. Lucas came over the next day, and we still acted like we didn't know ourselves before now. He brought some documents he had printed out and compiled based on the division of the assets. I didn't see the use in getting anything from Greg, but Greg insisted. He was going to leave me with the house, and the boutique was in my name, so it didn't matter. I also read through some documents, and it mentioned that Greg wanted to leave me with a huge amount of cash. I protested, saying I didn't need something like that, but I felt like it was an excuse to just see Lucas again. Lucas said he would come over again in some days with the finalized papers, which Greg and I will have to sign. I was sad but happy at the same time, and I don't know if that makes sense. Lucas kept contacting me at night, and we texted talking about random things. I had taken Jonah to school that day and got back home. I was bored and didn't know what to do. It was like Lucas read my mind from anywhere he was, and I heard the doorbell ring. I opened the door to see Lucas standing in my front with his usual suit and the bag he carried. I wasn't expecting him, so it was awkward. He explained that he called Greg and informed him that he was coming, but Greg said he was at work, but he should show me the documents so I could agree on them. I told Lucas to come in, and he sat down. I could feel his scent lingering in the air when it passed, and it made me feel some kind of way. He asked when Greg would be back, but I didn't think he had a motive, so I told him in the evening, and we started talking about the documents. He told me to come sit beside him to look at the documents clearer, and it was dumb, I know. I listened to him, and I felt his hands brush past my thighs. He leaned in for a kiss, and I accepted it. It felt different than Greg's own. I don't know how it happened, but we were both on the bed, staring at the ceiling with the sheets over us. The guilt came back to me, and it was due to the fact that I had just slept with my ex, who was also our divorce lawyer. I knew it also meant that I just cheated on my husband because the divorce had not been finalized. Lucas turned his head to face me and smiled at me. He asked me if I didn't enjoy what we just did, and I lied to him that I didn't. It was one of the best things I'd ever felt before. He asked me if I didn't miss this because he knew I was lying. I told him to leave because I couldn't take it anymore. I had mixed feelings, but with what happened, a part of me knew I wanted to be with Greg, and I told Lucas that. I told him we should forget what had happened between us in the past and right now. I also told Lucas that if my marriage didn't work out, I wanted to get divorced happily and not have anything to do with him. Me sleeping with him made me sure that I felt nothing for him. I don't know what triggered him, but he got up and started dressing up. It was clear that he was angry at me, but I didn't do what I said wrong. He told me he wished I had changed my mind and that I was going to regret not changing my mind. He packed his things and told me he was going to come back and he would inform Greg. I didn't know what to say, and I kept quiet. The remaining days went smoothly, and I noticed that Greg was changing. He was trying to be there when I needed it, and we were discussing our feelings more. I was beginning to change my mind on the divorce because I wanted to make this marriage work. The guilt of sleeping with Lucas was still there, and I tried pushing it to the back of my mind. Greg and I didn't bother contacting Lucas again for him to come with any papers. 1 week had passed since I had an affair with Lucas. Greg and I were enjoying our time together in the living room. He had taken time off from work to spend it with me. The doorbell rang and he went to check who it was. It took some time for him to get back, so I went to check on him. I saw Lucas standing at the door with a strong look on his face. I don't know what he told Greg, but Greg told him to come in and sit down. He also told me to sit. Greg told Lucas that he was planning on canceling the divorce, but with what he heard from him, he wanted to confirm it from me, or divorce was going to happen as soon as possible. I was scared because I knew something had happened at the door, and I'll never know what it was. Greg asked me if it was true that I'd slept with Lucas. I denied it at first because there was no proof and it was just claims. Everything changed when Lucas played a voice record and I heard my voice. It was when I had just slept with him and the conversation we had. I know I messed up big time. I tried denying, but there was no use, so I told him it was true. I also said it was during our divorce, but I know I still cheated on him. I tried apologizing, but he didn't listen. I looked at Lucas angrily, but he had a tiny smirk on his face. He was happy about all this happening, and I felt like hitting his face. I knew it wasn't his fault, but mine. Lucas said he was going to leave and told Greg to contact him about the divorce if he wanted to change anything. Greg just sat looking at me dumbstruck. I think he was thinking about everything that happened because he had a sad look on his face. I told him I still wanted him, and what happened was a silly mistake, but he didn't listen. I also told him about my past with Lucas and how I'd slept with him when Greg was overseas. That made him more infuriated and he left the house. It happened 2 days ago and I wasn't able to contact him because I think he blocked me. I'm all alone with Jonah in the house, but I'm worried that I'll lose Jonah since Lucas and Greg were plotting something regarding the divorce. I don't know what to do because it feels like I'll lose everything. How do I make things better? Please help me. ***. Comments. ***. 1. *** u/Reddit user. 1. ***. Okay, you messed up big time, Valerie. What were you thinking? The moment things went wrong was when you didn't tell Greg about Lucas, and then you even agreed to meet up with him. Also, what kind of wife agrees to be friends with her? You knew what it was going to come to. You should give up because I don't think he will take you back. 2. ***. u/Reddit user 2. ***. u/Reddit user 1. ***. Can you stop bashing the poor lady? She made silly mistakes and she came here for advice. Valerie, your marriage sounds great even if you were unsure of the love you had for Greg. You still tried to make it work when you felt nothing, and I feel like that's a good thing you did. If Greg ends the marriage, you should find someone else who deserves you. Don't cry over spilled milk. 3. ***. u/Reddit user 3. ***. When you mean you're worried you'll lose everything, do you mean the house and the boutique? I thought you were rich, so you shouldn't worry about that, haha. If you do want to fix things, you should apologize to him once he gets home, and maybe his family members if they'll listen to you. But if not, there's nothing you can do. Update. Okay, well, a lot of things have happened since I made that post. Greg came back 2 days after with Lucas. I was scared, but I listened to the advice I read in the comments. I apologized to Greg so many times, but he still didn't listen. Lucas showed me the divorce papers and I was shocked. I wasn't going to get any money or even the house. It also wrote that he'll be taking custody of Jonah, but I argued on that. I can't lose everything. In 1 day, so he agreed. I protested about lots of things on the divorce paper, but I knew I deserved it. I signed the paper because Greg said he didn't want to see my face anymore and I should leave quickly. I went to my parents' house and told them all that happened. They said they were ashamed of me, and that hurt to hear. I also contacted Greg's family, but they said they don't want to talk to me. I left Jonah with Greg because he said he deserved to see him more than I did, and I know he was right. I don't deserve anything. He left me with the boutique because it was already on my name, but I think Greg paid them to leave because they all quit some days later and said they couldn't work for me anymore. This happened because I wasn't content with my marriage and I didn't talk about my true feelings with him. If you're married out there and not happy, talk to your husband about it and discuss it. Thank you for the advice and for reading this.